second term. That is the elephant in the room.
Jonathan Beale in Washington. Well, we can speak now to Ian Lesser. He is a distinguished fellow and advisor to the president at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News today. I wondered what you think will be the expectations from the summit.
Well, I think, as you've just heard, it's a terribly important summit. It's the 75th anniversary, but it's going on against the backdrop of a war in Europe. And I think there's a very strong consensus within the alliance to give Ukraine what it needs to defend itself, especially with regard to air defense and other assets. And there is indeed a lot of money at stake. A commitment of $40 billion is not small. But in a sense, there's no political insurance on either side of the Atlantic in the years ahead. There are important elections that we've seen, some that are coming. Political change can influence policies. There's no question about that. It's about defense spending for NATO itself and not just for Ukraine. But I think at the end of the day, against the backdrop of this war and an increasingly fraught relationship with Russia, all the allies are going to see the importance of NATO.
Yes. So what exactly can they offer concrete to President Zelensky? Because in the end, he would really like NATO membership speeded up, wouldn't he?
Well, he would dearly like that, and for understandable reasons. But I think, NATO operates by consensus, and there's a lot of caution, including in some major allies within NATO, about going further on commitments to Ukrainian membership. What they've said is that Ukraine will eventually become a member. The door is open. But they're not willing to do it right now, and I don't think there's going to be any change in that policy in this summit.
So what else is likely to be on the agenda? You mentioned the fact that there are many elections around the world and some of those leaders not so strong as they were. Is that going to have an impact on the summit?
I think that sort of goes on in the background. Clearly, these are real issues. But in terms of the summit agenda itself and the decision points from the summit, it's likely to be all about NATO policy, NATO defense spending, where NATO is looking around the world, because there are other issues on the agenda. Obviously, the deterrence and defense vis-a-vis Russia is at the top of the agenda, but there are other things. An increasingly difficult relationship with China. The United States is very keen to get allies to focus more on Indo-Pacific security. There are challenges of counterterrorism and maritime security coming out of the South and the Middle East and Africa. That will be on the agenda as well. And the question of who is spending what, how much, that's hugely important because it will influence the politics of this, especially on the US side in the years to come.
Ian Lesser, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News.